Good morning. I'm Mary Yulbein, Chair of the OB Division, and I'd like to welcome you to the 2016 OB Division Lifetime Achievement Award Address. The Lifetime Achievement Award is by far the most prestigious award given by the OB Division and one of the most prestigious awards given in the Academy. The Lifetime Achievement Award recognizes preeminent scholars who have made exceptional contributions to our discipline throughout their career. In selecting a winner for this award, the selection committee looks for someone who has not only been an outstanding scholar in terms of publications, but also someone who has helped shape the field. They also look for an individual who has contributed to OB scholarship and practice, not just through publishing impactful work, but through activities such as mentoring doctoral students and junior faculty, exceptional teaching, work that speaks to practitioners, editorships of major journals, and other leadership positions within the profession. This year's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient is Blake Ashforth. Blake is the professor and Horace Steele Arizona Heritage Chair at Arizona State University. Blake is, as we all know, unambiguously deserving of this honor. Right now, what I'd like to do is turn the floor over to Christy Rogers, who will introduce Blake and help honor him. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Christy Rogers, and I had the honor of being Blake's doctoral student at Arizona State. On behalf of his former and current students who worked together to nominate Blake for this award, I'm excited to give you a glimpse of the extent to which Blake enriches the field of OB and the lives of those in it. Blake is truly an exceptional scholar. As of last week, Google Scholar placed Blake's citation count just over 42,000. In terms of peer-reviewed publications, I lost track after number 82, more than half of which were either first-authored or sole-authored. His authorship of countless book chapters and a terrific book of his own make it difficult to dive into any area of the OB literature without seeing his valuable contribution. Numbers like these make it hard to believe what I'm about to say, but Blake is an even better person than he is a scholar. He will leave this field far better than he found it, simply by being himself and sharing the integrity, passion, service, and humility that come to him so naturally, and leaving those around him feeling energized and engaged in research, as well as modeling his generosity and compassion toward colleagues. Perhaps Blake's students take their role as qualitative researchers a little too seriously, but in thinking about how to introduce him, we tried to put together stories that capture Blake. We tried, and we failed. As Spencer and I chatted about this, we realized that it's impossible to capture Blake in just one story or one moment. As Blake would say, the devil is in the details, which I think is Canadian for every interaction matters. So rather than sharing a single story or a moment, what we really want to share is everyday Blake, and how he works side by side with collaborators to cultivate joy in the research grind. What exactly does a typical day of the research grind look like with Blake down the hallway? He arrives at the office at the same time every morning, smiling and saying hello to those he passes. He sits down at his desk with a list of about 34 projects taped to his right, a cup of terrible-smelling instant coffee to his left, and turns on the kind of white noise machine most commonly used to put a baby to sleep. In this setting, he spends his valuable time every day bettering the careers and the lives of those around him with an open door and an open invitation for anyone who wants to exchange ideas. When you share this hallway, Blake's passion and energy for research are truly contagious. Despite the daily offers, the instant coffee has not caught on in the same way. He simply loves the research process, and he takes time to complete every step in the most thoughtful way. For example, when Blake receives a conditional acceptance, he checks every single reference in the reference list against the original book or paper for accuracy. Why? Because he knows citations matter to scholars' careers, and he wants to get them right. As another example, when David Sluss asked for socialization readings on his first day of the doctoral program, Blake happily handed over a huge stack of papers, like actual papers. David noticed the insightful notes on each and every article and used that as an example of how you read and process the literature. Blake is extremely committed to helping his students hone the craft of writing and gives lightning-fast feedback on small increments of work, sometimes just a single paragraph. We can all remember times when we sent Blake something and heard a knock on our door not more than 5 minutes later. With a red pen in hand, he comes walking down, ready to decode the messy handwritten feedback. Perhaps what is most memorable about an average day with Blake is how he makes colleagues and students feel like they belong by knocking on office doors daily, personally inviting all doctoral students and faculty to have lunch together. Blake knocks on each doctoral student's door about 240 times per year. And by our count, he's made the lunch rounds about 4,700 times since joining the ASU faculty. He leads lunch conversations without talking shop, and his stories only get better the third and fourth time you hear them. And once you learn over lunch that Blake loves superheroes and drinks chocolate milk, the open invitation that I mentioned earlier to exchange research ideas with such a prolific scholar becomes a little bit less intimidating. Finally, Blake's the kind of person who would do anything to help a student or a colleague in a pinch. He picks Beth up from the airport when she flies in from data collection, and although he doesn't have a cell phone, he always finds her. He's currently letting Beth store her couch in his garage this summer. And Blake is the kind of guy who would actually jump out of an airplane for a student. In fact, he and his wife Deb did just this for me 5 years ago when I was very nervous to honor my commitment to go skydiving for my husband's milestone birthday. I'd love to share more, but no one can give you a sense of Blake's contagious and unwavering passion for this career quite like he can. Ladies and gentlemen, Blake Ashforth.
Thank you so much, Christy. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much, Christy. I really appreciate that. I got to say, my number one pleasure in this career and my strongest point of pride are the doctoral students. Talk amongst yourselves. But really, they've just been a godsend. So Glenn Kreiner, David Sluss, Will Fugate, Spencer Harrison, Christy, of course, and Beth Shinoff are the ones I my students. And each of them has just been a joy. A dozen other students beyond that I might not have supervised, but I've had the honor of working with. I know I've co-authored over 50 people over the years, and every one of you has just been precious and unique, and I'm richer for it. So, you know, the model of the OB division is making connections. And at the end of the day, man, it's relationships. Whether it's here or it's home or it's your sports teams, it's all about relationships and what flows from that. So you guys, I've been blessed to work with you and know you. And as Christy said, forgot. I mean, these guys are all wonderful scholars, but even better human beings. So thank you so much for that. When the emails came in about the award, they kind of came in two different varieties. There was a kind that said, congratulations, well deserved, very sweet, just very authentic, and I deeply appreciate those emails. Then there was another whole set that said things like, take the hint, they want you to retire, or how much did you pay the committee? Or, do you have an illness we don't know about? Those were also deeply appreciated. Now, in point of fact, academia did save me from near certain death, and I will give you documentary evidence. So this is me with my gang circa 1972. I mean, look at the socks and shoes on that guy. Total badass. Total badass. We used to play ball hockey way too loud. We would chew bubble gum by the pound. I mean, there was no stopping us until academia kind of saved my life. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is how not to kill your passion for research. Presumably everybody here, when you joined this profession, did it out of an intrinsic reason. There was something about the idea of working with cool ideas and solving important problems and teaching tomorrow's leaders that kind of touched you in the heart. We come here galvanized to do really cool things. Something, though, in the process of our socialization and our tenure process often kind of slowly kind of suffocates that passion. So much so that once we get tenure, often a lot of us kind of say, well, the heck with research. So what I want to talk about today is just why does that happen, and how can we hopefully forestall it so we keep that passion alive? Because I'm going to argue, passion, along with the relationships, makes the world go round. The more you're energized and working on your papers, the better the papers are because you're totally emotionally invested in the work. So I'm going to try and persuade you of something you already know in your heart of hearts, the importance of passion, and hopefully to keep it alive. So why did you become a scholar? Think back to your early days. If you're a doctoral student, maybe that was last month. If you're a professor, maybe that was 5 years, 10 years, 30 years ago. But think back to those early days and why you thought, yeah, being a scholar is a good gig. One reason might be, hey, I saw important problems that no one seemed to be answering. Another might be, I really wanted to understand what makes things tick. A third, I wanted to teach future generations of leaders. It sounds better than perpetual student. Or, hey, I wanted summers off. Now, hopefully somewhere in that mix of reasons, and preferably the first three, is you. And my bet is everybody in this room has some mix of the three reasons in their heart when they thought, yeah, what a cool gig this is going to be. And it's those reasons I want to speak to because we want to keep those alive, because that's where the good ideas tend to come from. So here's my story and how I got my initial passion for research. That isn't me, by the way. That was a bad setup, wasn't it? But all right. So when I was in high school, I read this article in the New York Times Magazine about the Stanford Prison Experiment, Philip's article. And this is actually a shot from the experiment. And if you don't remember, what he did is he got a number of students to volunteer for this experiment. And he randomly said, some of you are going to be guards, and some of you are going to be prisoners, and let's see what happens. It was really more a simulation than an experiment, because he didn't know. What happened was, in no time at all, the guards turned into jackasses. They became, not all of them, but they became abusive of the people who were under their tutelage. And as for the prisoners, they were kind of compelled to act out. In some cases, they actually got traumatized. It got so bad that he had to let a couple go from the experiment, and after 6 days, I think it was, he actually pulled the plug on the whole thing. As a teenager, I'm reading this, and I'm thinking, whoa, how on earth did this happen? How did these bright, normal Stanford students, well, as normal as Stanford students can be, yeah. How did he turn these bright, normal Stanford students into these kind of crazy people acting out the roles of guards and prisoners? Okay, fast forward. I was getting my degree at University of Toronto, and I was torn between business and psychology. I love both areas, business and psychology, but never the twain shall meet. They were entirely different disciplines. So I was a paradox. I mean, I was majoring in business but taking psychology on the side as a minor. Until fourth year as an undergrad, when I took a course in this weird thing called organizational behavior. And being in Canada, behavior was spelled with a U, even weirder. So it was taught by this wonderful man right here, Martin Evans, who went on to become one of my mentors in the doctoral program at Toronto. And it was like scales fell from my eyes. I thought, the psychology of work, how cool is this? What makes people tick in a work setting? So I thought, man, oh man, I love this stuff. All right, after I graduated, I went to work in the bank, and that's a picture of me in 1947. And I worked in half a dozen different branches during my time in the bank. And one thing you kept on seeing were that people would be hired and they'd be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, raring to go. But something in the next few weeks, the next few months, slowly got beaten out of them. The light kind of just turned off in their eyes. Now, if you asked your bosses what was going on, they would say, well, with the money we pay, this is kind of the dead wood you hire. And I thought, no way, man. They didn't come here like that. They came here ready to do a good job. Something that we have done as an institution has beaten the life out of these people. So while I was doing this, I was doing my MBA at night school, and I took a course from a guy named Bob House, also a wonderful guy who also became one of my mentors when I jumped ship into the doctoral program. So back then, this was the early 80s, back then, the MBA course, at least at Toronto, you got a lot of acetates that had things like the 10 ways to run a meeting, or how to delegate authority, or how to give constructive feedback. Theory, yeah, it was all about how to. Not with Bob. So Bob, the course is called Power in Politics and Organizations. He gave us Pfeffer and Solanzik, March and Simon, Seyert and March. Everybody in the class thought, oh my God, this guy's wacko. I thought, this is the coolest stuff ever, man. Give me more of this stuff. And it was Bob's class that made me think, wow, you can make a living being Bob, minus the eye patch? How cool is that? So it was literally in Bob's class that I decided to jump ship. I thought, I got to get me some of this, man. So I applied to the doctoral program at the same institution, and the PhD director said to me, you've been admitted, and if you like, you can join us tomorrow. Now, I was only 2/3 of the way through the MBA program, but it took me all of 6 seconds to jump at the opportunity, and I got to miss econometrics. So I went on for the PhD program. Okay, that is my story and how I kind of came to have the passion I do for institutions. But your story, too, I'm sure, involves an emotional connection with scholarship. Back to that first slide, the reasons that got you here and have you sitting right here, I'm sure, have as much to do with emotion as they do with dispassionate rationality. We're here because, hopefully, we love what we do. And it's that passion we've got to remember, because that gets us up in the morning, gets us doing cool work. So when people ask you, whether it's in a job talk or maybe you've written an article and you've got to write this sweet little bio at the end, and aren't those cool? They're always written in the third person like somebody else wrote it. No, that's you talking about yourself. So in those kind of bios, they ask you, what are your research interests? And like this guy here, you kind of stroke your chin and you say, well, you know, transformational leadership and sustainability. You say something that sounds kind of very blah, blah, blah. But it's kind of dispassionate. It almost treats our profession as if it were just a job. You come in the morning, you may teach a class, you sit on a committee, you move some numbers around in a spreadsheet. 5 o'clock, you go home and have your real life. Of course, that isn't the way it ought to be, and yet something in the terminology we use, the language we use, seems to suggest that it really is just that. Well, a number of years ago, I was in a session, I've forgotten when or where, but it was with Jane Dutton, and she asked the people in her group, what are your research passions? Passions. And I thought, what the heck? What kind of a wacko question is that? I mean, next thing you know, we're going to be hugging at the academy. You know, that way lies madness. Madness, I tell you. So after my Neanderthal brain shut down, I thought, damn it, that's it exactly. That is it exactly. These are our research passions. We care about these things. They're really cool ideas. These are important problems. In our own small way, we're hopefully moving the world forward. This is really cool stuff. And that idea of our research as a passion talks more about our profession as a calling, as something we are called, minus the religion, but it's something that we feel called, compelled to do. We care so much about it, the desire is so strong that we're inspired to do this kind of stuff. We get home and we still open that JAP article, or we can't wait to talk to our colleague tomorrow morning. We just let us at it. The desire is that strong. And that is more in the spirit of what I think we actually do as researchers, despite our attempts to kind of neuter it down with this dispassionate language. The trouble is, it is hard to keep that research passion alive. Have you ever tried to make a campfire like this person when you have wet kindling? Good luck. And yet I think that our weird field kind of dumps buckets of cold water on our academic kindling. We actually make it difficult for people to use their passion in all the best ways possible. And there's nothing sadder than seeing the lights go out in scholars, just like I saw with the bankers all those years ago. And they go out for many of the same reasons. There's something about what we do in our socialization and our promotion processes that grind people down. Our training in that great wall of academia called tenure and promotion often kill it off. So here I've got a candid picture of assistant professors at work. Am I okay, the camera guy? Good? Okay. So you can sort of tell what year they're in by where they are on the wall. First year guy, I'm sure. Second, third, fourth. The guy at the top, he's that close to tenure. They're working hard to get it. I think this problem, this grinding down, begins with the tension between exploration and exploitation, which Marx did a brilliant job of describing in 1991. Exploration is all about novelty. It's about blazing new trails. It's about having a cool take on maybe an old problem or seeing a new construct that fits an important gap and explaining an important puzzle. It's about seeing something that no one has before that will really move people forward in a pretty cool way. Coupled with that, you have exploitation. Probably a horrible term, but hey, we'll stick with it. And what that means is you're building. You're then paving the trails that have been blazed by the explorers. This is the difficult spade work of making up constructs, testing hypotheses, looking at boundary conditions, on and on and on. And most of our time, and most of us, by definition, spend our time doing exploitation, because a single really cool idea can take years, if not decades, to fully exploit. So goal setting, for example. So years ago, Latham and his colleagues had a brilliant idea that, hey, if people have specific, challenging, somewhat realistic and measurable, and I just missed one, whatever it was, those goals, then maybe they'll work all the harder. Cool idea, takes 10 seconds to say, but it's taken, 30, 40 years to actually nail down in how it actually works. So we need both of these things. If you had only exploration, we would have tons of great ideas, but no evidence as to what actually works or why. If you had only exploitation, you would just run out of ideas in no time and do increasingly trivial studies, which is my fear, by the way, of the kind of the road that we're on, that we have a lot of stuff where you think, oh my God, can we not think of this in a new way? So we need them both. There's a tension there. We need exploration to animate, infuse exploitation. We need exploitation to then see if the explorations make a lot of sense in practical terms. We need both. But here's the problem. Exploration is much chancier. So to the extent you come to the field because of exploration, and I'm willing to bet those first 3 bullets I had up there about why you became a scholar, a lot of those are exploration kinds of things. You think a new take on an old problem, or you see a really promising insight to something. There's something you want to do. You want to make your mark in a meaningful way. The trouble is we make it very difficult to do exploration. First, there's a bigger upfront investment in terms of eclectic literatures and qual research. Because this is, by definition, something pretty novel, often you've got to read a lot of sprawling literature to get a sense of just what the heck is going on. So you're pulled in many directions as a scholar reading this stuff. Maybe you've got to do qual research, observations, interviews, because you got lots of cool questions, but you don't have answers. That takes time. And if you are a doctoral student looking at the job market, if you're an assistant professor looking at the tenure clock, you think, yay. So you have this dialogue. Will I find something important? I mean, I hope I will, but the reality is all I have now are some cool ideas and questions, but I got to find out a lot more. And I don't know how this is going to turn out. And unfortunately, this is not an open-ended world, man. You've got to come up with publishable stuff in a timely way. If so, can I convince reviewers that it's important? And here is a huge problem, the liability of newness. Reviewers tend to prefer that which complements rather than challenges their existing knowledge. It's paradoxical. We're scholars. We exist at the frontiers of knowledge. We are all about learning new things, pushing the boundaries. And yet, if you push them too far, people go, whoa. And that's because we as scholars have this investment in our knowledge, in the status quo. We know what we think leadership is all about, for example. So if somebody has a radically different take on leadership, suddenly they're saying all the stuff I thought I knew might not really work. And rather than say, oh, cool, our impulse is to go, well, he must be wrong. I mean, surely it can't be. And we find reasons to diss that kind of work. So the poster child for this is Jay Barney. So Jay Barney, years ago, had this really cool idea, resource-based view of the firm, and he couldn't get anybody to bite. He sent it to all the big journals, and they all kind of had very nice reasons to say, basically, yeah, go home, Jay. But Jay thought, no, I think this stuff is really cool. So Jay was editing special issue of Journal of Management and quietly slipped in his RBV paper into that journal. Well, 25 years later, hey, it's the anniversary. 25 years later, it's got 10,000 hits on Web of Science and 48,000 hits on Google Scholar. And 48,000 is more than most of us will get in all of our papers in our career. I mean, it's truly phenomenal. But realize it only happened because he persisted in spite of what all the learned reviewers and editors were telling him. What do you mean? I was skirting over that part. If so, will readers be receptive? Just like reviewers, they too have a liability about, do I really want to... So there was a really cool article that came out 2012, and I just top of the head, which is why I'm blanking on the authors, and they were looking at a new way to put together commitment and identification. Personally, I loved it because it spoke to what I think is going on already, but they put it in words. I guarantee you, though, it'll be a tough sell because it's a radically different way of putting the two constructs together. But I thought, hey, AMR published this. How good is that? I mean, clearly, maybe more is stating the case then. Maybe there is a place for novelty. And finally, can I crank out enough successful explorations to make tenure? This is a bad one. In principle, the guys who write the P&T evaluation letters, your external reviewers, the people who are on the P&T committees, department, college, and on up, in principle, we're about the quality of your work and the impact that it's had. That's what all the letters ask for. The trouble is, well, there's variance in when tenure happens. LSE is 8 years. But let's say you're coming from your 6th year, which is pretty normative, at least in the States. Okay, it's hard to show impact after, it's actually more like 5 years. You go up in the fall. It's hard to show impact in that short a time frame. And of course, the proxy for impact is often citation counts. I know it's imperfect, but that's the best, well, it's the measure we tend to use a heck of a lot. So what happens is these well-meaning review writers and the well-meaning P&T committee members default to how many top-tier publications you have, because they really can't assess, not that well, the impact of your papers, because that's to be determined down the road. Well, if you're doing really cool exploratory work, you're thinking, can I really crank out enough of these to make them happy? I mean, how many bolts do you have in this kind of a gun? And the sad fact is, in a lot of research-oriented schools, if you do 2 of those, which might be phenomenal given the impact we just saw with Jay's work, at the end of the day, it's 2 A's. And a lot of journals will say, and a lot of schools will say, well, it's only 2 A's. But if it's exploratory stuff, man, you might have moved the world, or soon will once the people get to know your work all the better. And yet, So what happens is we tend to back off. So we gravitate to exploitation because it is safer. It's more predictable. It'll get you that job. It'll get you a promotion. And to me, it's a tragedy if what you wanted to do really was exploration. So let's say you're a doc student. You're Walter or Wanda Mitty, and you're pondering a thesis. So you start off saying, okay, I got a bold new idea, but it's a little risky given that I've got to get some quick journal hits. I better wait until I have tenure. In the meantime, I'll play it safe and do study 73 through 75 on X. And so you go ahead and do that. It's not really what you wanted to do, but you know it's going to check off the boxes you need to have checked off. It works, time passes, and Walter Wanda earns tenure. Now, what was that bold idea I once had? Well, I've been working flat out for 6 years, and that would take too much retooling. I'll do study 76 on X. And so it goes. Your passion is stillborn. You're now doing stuff that's okay, sure, yeah, it pays the bills, sure, okay. But it's not what you really wanted to do when you got into this field. And that thing that you wanted to do, not only do you soon forget about it, but you lose the drive to even read the literature, and oh my God, and there goes the passion. And unfortunately, I think it happens all too often. I'm willing to bet everybody in this room, or most people in this room, and me included in this, at some point have had a brilliant idea that you talked yourself out of. You think, oh, well, yeah, it's a cool idea, but I don't really know that literature. Or if it's so good, how come Angelo Kanicki hasn't already done it? You know, why? The thing is, you're that somebody, right? That's you. You're the one with the cool idea. Why not you? Everything that we do as a society, the academy, the journals that we have, the research grants, those nice people at IRB, they're all there for you. They're there to actually help you, to enable you to do really cool work. Why not you? Absolutely, why not you? When we look at the people who have really moved the field forward, I mean, I just mentioned Jay Barney and Jim March and so on. Why is that not you? Why is that not any of us? Give yourself a chance, if exploration is truly what you want to do, give yourself a chance to actually do that. Because exploitation is where most of us spend our time, it attracts the lion's share of advice. Because most of us are almost by definition in the right-hand side of that tension, exploration, exploitation, we gravitate in our PDWs, we gravitate in our mentoring to giving more advice about exploitation. And here are some typical recipes you would hear in a PDW for doctoral students or junior faculty. First, have a narrow research focus. God forbid you read outside your literature. Because if you keep it nice and narrow, you can go deep. And when you go deep, you can then leverage your learning and crank out those extensions. Before you know it, you've got your 4 A's come tenure time. Beautiful. Bob's your uncle. Great. The trouble is, if you're trying to do exploratory work, very often, more often than not, you've got to look outside your domain because some of the coolest ideas come from cross-fertilization, whether it's theory, settings, whatever. Spreading your boundaries. But you know what your mentor's going to say? Mile wide, inch deep. I would say instead, I don't know who told me this one, but a specialist is someone who knows more and more until they know everything about nothing. Right? That's the danger. The more narrow you get, in fact, here's a story. I've thought of this in many years. When I was in college, a buddy of mine, he was studying the end of the ringworm. Not the front end, but the business end. I'm not kidding you. It apparently had unique medicinal properties. So the more you knew about the bum of the ringworm, it solved some disease, I don't know. That was his life. Forget the head, that was somebody else. He was a bum man. It made for great reunions because he got teased to death, but that's my point, though. He has a viable career, but realize, well, pretty narrow and highly deep. All right. The charm bracelet approach. So when I was a teenager, my sister was hard to buy presents. I mean, she's younger, my little sister. What do you get her? I mean, she's got 1,000 Barbie dolls. What do you get her? Well, my mom, bless her, gave my sister a charm bracelet. And those things have like 1,000 hooks on them, which means, hey, 1,000 gifts. So for the next God knows how many years, just get Karen a charm every Christmas, every birthday. Beautiful. Well, that is what we tell our students and our junior faculty to do well with their research. Keep adding independent variables, add moderators, add mediators, add DVs, think about boundary conditions, and better yet, be able to tell people in a job talk or whatever, here is my clear programmatic agenda of research that's going to solve the world's problems. Nicely laid out. The more linear, the better. Oh man, okay, if you want to do it, but realize that's exploitation entirely, it's not exploration. Or perhaps do a meta-analysis, they're always well cited, perhaps develop a new scale, guaranteed citations if it's done well, publish at least 3 articles in a given area. I heard that one at a PDW, and the argument there is, once you've done 3, they can't ignore you. No matter how bad the work is, they got to acknowledge that Ashforth did something on this. Throw the guy a bone. Now, I'm sure you could get, from each of you guys have your own little recipe list you've heard from countless PDWs and mentoring and so on. Ugh! Shoot me now, man. These recipes are fine if, this is a big if you have an intrinsic interest in the topic. If exploitation is what you want to do, bless you, go do it. But to do it only for instrumental reasons is an absolute soul killer. In fact, here's a picture of Christy, Spencer, and Beth right there. Although Spencer never wears a tie, so it couldn't be Spencer. Scarf. That's true. It's a soul killer because if it's not what you inherently want to do, man, oh man, this stuff can make it feel like a grind. Now, I've got to say, before I got tenure, I broke all the rules, but it's more because I was just stupid. I really was kind of clueless as a doctoral student and junior faculty guy. So I read very eclectically and did whatever I thought was interesting. Part of it, if I'm being honest, was also hubris. I kind of figured if I thought it was good, others would too, so it'd all kind of fall out in the end. And I luckily and stupidly kind of blundered into it actually working for me. But I can tell you the downside to that strategy, it's a hell of a lot of work because every time you change topics, it's a whole new ramp up with literature, maybe new co-authors, maybe a new way of collecting data. It's a hellacious grind. I shouldn't say grind, but it's difficult to pull that off. But the reason I did it is because it's fun. Every one of these projects was, at the moment, near and dear to my heart. So I was at the Michigan party last night, and Laura Morgan Roberts, I wasn't prompting her, by the way, but she said to me, why does she do all these papers simultaneously? And she yelled, and she put up both arms, because it's fun. In fact, she said, if I don't do research every day, I get grumpy. Now, that's a person with passion, right? If she doesn't actually get to do her whatever it is that day on research, it really bothers her. It's an identity issue. Hey, because she really wants to do research. This is who she is. It has to express herself. And my concern is, man, if you're following this recipe list only because it's instrumental, oh, that's going to kill you. So really, is it any wonder that research productivity drops after tenure? It's an unfortunate reality that even though you might have a career that lasts 30, 40 years, because tenure comes after 6, when you look across the great mass of humanity that are scholars, there's a noticeable drop post-tenure. And part of it is the story I think that I'm telling here. That is that people kind of get burnt out. This isn't what they really intended to do. And now that they've done it, oh my God, now thinks I can do something else. I can write a book, I can be a chair, whatever you want to do. But God forbid I go back and do this grind again. So I think we tend to lose something because of this process. So let me talk about the power of passion. Darn it. Why does this stuff matter so much? If authors have passion, their papers tend to read that way. They're engrossing rather than flat. So engagement creates flow and enriches insight. If you are totally into your paper, body and soul, emotionally, cognitively, behaviorally, if you can do that, you're totally into your paper, then you've got all faculties, you're firing on all cylinders about this topic, and good ideas tend to just naturally emerge. The flow idea means that you're so immersed in it, you kind of lose track of the time. You just, oh, it's dinner time. How did that suddenly happen? You kind of get caught up in this enterprise called research. You're in love with what you do. So remember that the bathtub guy from Greece, Archimedes. So legend has it that he was trying to solve some physics problem, and he thought he'd take a break by having a nice warm Greek bath. So he sat down in the bathtub, and it suddenly hit him that the volume of the water he displaced was equal to the volume of his body, which solved some important principle, whatever the heck it was. And he shouted "Eureka!" and he went streaking through Greektown. This is what happens when you are immersed body and soul in a research project. Your subconscious keeps turning it over. You think you've gone home, but because you're so into this idea, at the back of your head, you're still churning. How many days have you've been struggling with a problem at work? You can't solve this incredibly complex puzzle. You wake up and, oh, man, there's the answer. Well, overnight, your brain's been chugging away. Why? Because you're invested. Emotionally, you care enough that you keep churning things over. So I ride a bike to and from work. And part of the reason is because I don't have to worry about traffic. My mind goes everywhere. I'm not trying to think shop. But I can't tell you how many times I've arrived home and grabbed a notepad because of something that just popped up as I ran a red light. Okay, so years ago, Glenn Kreiner, he was a first or second year doctoral student. And he came in one Monday morning and he said, "Thanks a lot." What have I done now? And he said, I was at the movies, Ants to be particular. And he said that all he could see were the OB implications. Motivation here, bad leadership there, team dynamic. He said, "You've ruined it for me." And I thought, oh, my work is done. That's a guy who now is totally engaged in OB, and to this day still is. When you live and breathe this stuff, even when you unplug, which is a good thing to do, still, you care about it and your brain works it over. That's the power of passion. But it isn't all just about this bolt of insight. Passion also gives you the fuel to do the hard, grindy kind of stuff that even the most wild exploratory idea requires. So Angela Duckworth talks about grit, which is kind of stick-to-itiveness, sticking with a project till you finally milked it to the very end. And she argues that passion is a huge reason why grit is possible. In fact, this TED Talk of hers has 8.9 million people viewing it. Almost as much as Jay Barney's citation count. So people are really buying into this idea of the importance of passion. Okay, so what am I saying? My point is not that only exploration requires passion. My point is that if exploration is your passion, and it's often that passion that hooks prospective doc students. So remember the very first slide about why you got into this field to begin with? That stuff inherently is passion-laden. These are intrinsic reasons why you couldn't not be a scholar. It's so cool to play with these ideas. So that passion, if it's true for you, it tends to get trampled by the anxiety associated with getting hired and tenured and promoted. So instead of settling for the doable, let's reach for the inspirational. Let's try and remember why we became scholars in the first place. We're not here to move papers around and get publications that no one's going to read. We're here to hopefully change the world for the better. So just try to remember that inspirational reason that brought you here and have you sitting in the seat now. Now that'd be a really depressing note to end on. So how do we maintain and reignite passion? So how do we kind of keep this flame alive or rekindle it if it's kind of snuffed out for a while? First, make it personal. Now notice I've underlined the D. This is Sue Ashford. This is not me. But let me tell you a story. So for years, people would say to me at the academy, "How is your wife, Sue?" Okay. And for years, and again I mean years, I would see myself cited as Blake Ashford in the reference area. But then one year I thought, hey, I got a chance in this field. I actually came across a citation to Sue Ashforth. Ha ha! TH. Ha 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 ha. Anyway, what Sue argues is make it personal. She's got a brilliant paper at AMLE on hitting a home run, by which she meant a high-impact paper. And one of her recommendations, which I heartily endorse, is make it personal. And what she meant by that is make it about something you care about. So you heard my story about working in this grinding bank and seeing the Stanford prison experiment. That stuff fueled much of my research. One of my major interests, although I've drifted away from it, is the pathologies of organizations, the downside of working in organizations. A lot of that stuff, mindlessness, petty tyranny, burnout, defensive behavior, that came directly from what I lived, what I saw happening in the bank and also the government that I worked in before. I cared about that stuff because I wanted to know how the heck it happened. Why did the lights wink out in the people around me? So for you, what is your personal story? What is your background that makes you have a passion about something? The cool thing when you talk about academics, like this guy, this body right here, I guarantee you if there's 100 people here, there's 100 different stories to how you became academics. We are incredibly diverse in terms of our backgrounds. And in that diversity is the potential for really great stories. Well, what is your story? And make that work for you. So where do ideas that inspire passion come from? All sorts of places, but here are the big ones, I think. Talk to anyone and everyone. Keep your eyes peeled as best as possible. So not that long ago, I was taking a taxi ride, and it so happened my taxi driver was also a bounty hunter. Okay. Now I was working on dirty work with Mel, and I thought, whoa. In fact, I wanted to say, let's drive home again and come back to the airport. Just let's drive around all day. But anyway, as long as I could, I was pumping the guy to get insights on what he did. And that I don't know many bounty hunters in my life, so it was very useful to talk to this guy. Same thing. This stuff can happen anywhere and everywhere. Henry Mintzberg wrote, the library is the worst place in which to go to find a research topic. Oops. And there's a lot of truth to that statement. The thing with the library is, by the time research ideas appear in the back of journals, it's often already too late because someone else is doing it. Given the publication lag, this stuff could already be half done. In fact, if you guys are like me as an author, you often plant your next research project in research implications for next time. You know, future research should look at exactly what I'm doing now. And that way, you can say, well, according to Ashforth, this is what I should be working on. Yeah. So you cannot trust what it says in the back of articles, man. You cannot do that. So look anywhere, well, I shouldn't say anywhere but realize this is a very limited thing to do. Look for applied problems and theoretical puzzles. So what cool things are there out there that you think really need solving? So for example, our Division 1 Organization of the Natural Environment, they are all about solving an immensely important problem, getting our environment to be hospitable for us and the rest of wildlife in the world. How cool is that? It's an applied problem. Theoretical puzzles. So back when I was first working on dirty work with Glenn Kreiner, the puzzle that made us want to write the initial paper was that we knew from the literature on stigma that people who are stigmatized are viewed poorly by definition, which tends to corrode self-esteem. And yet when you look at all the ethnographies on people doing dirty work and talk to them or watch them doing their work, there's actually a lot of occupational pride. Sewer workers, pawnbrokers, they love what they, well, not always, but generally they feel pretty good about what they do. And we thought, oh, that shouldn't be. I mean, theory says otherwise. Boom, there was our theoretical puzzle. So look for something kind of cool like that, where you can really, you hopefully explain the important question. Cross boundaries. This is a big one. So we're very good at mapping out the terrain within a given level, individuals or groups or organizations or industries. We're very good within our disciplines. We're very good within our theories and within particular settings. What we suck at is crossing those boundaries, because that's somebody else. That's a whole other set of learning. That's a whole other set of paradigms and methodologies. Better, easier just to stick to our knitting and do what we already do. But the important questions lie across levels. We have milked within these things to death. I think the future of our field lies in crossing things. It's especially true of OB, because OB by definition is systemic. It's about organizations, and they aren't just individuals or teams or networks. They are everything simultaneously. Everything by definition is all about crossing boundaries. So I really do believe our best ideas to come happen when we have the courage to kind of cross levels. And believe me, I know how difficult that is. I know reviewers tend to pull papers, you know, the micro guy says more micro, the macro guy says, I know this is happening, yes. But don't you want to change the field for the better? It's these questions that are going to do that, I think. Read eclectically. Bob Sutton says hard ideas can come from soft sources. So no one needs to know that your cool research idea came from a Lady Gaga interviewing people. I don't mean to look at you, Shelley. But read eclectically. No one needs to know the sources, but everywhere is ammunition for the potential thing you're going to look at. Before I got tenure, I only read journal articles and newspapers. What an idiot. Really, what an idiot. So much more is to be found in the world out there. The last place I should be looking is my navel. So read eclectically. And read inspiring authors, beyond just the academy. Whoever that might be for you. I mean, these are guys I like, but whoever does it for you. A well-written novel often contains a wealth of insights about individuals, teams, networks. They don't use the terminology, of course, but a good novelist has this intuitive understanding of people. And it's amazing the insights you can get from good fiction. So my point is, yeah, what we do in journals is phenomenal, of course, but please don't let that be your only source of new ideas. And this all creates a virtuous circle. Passion creates more passion. So one of the things I studied back in the day was burnout. And burnout is how, in healthcare, usually it's some kind of caregiving setting, because you're tending to patients or students or the needy, their needs tend to grind you down. You want to work hard, you want to do well by them, but the perpetual needs just kind of wear you down, and you slowly burn out. But there's a paradox in the literature. People who are involved in long-term relationships, like Stacy documented in her book about home care workers, actually don't feel as burned out. They actually are sometimes energized by the work they do. Well, why is that? I think what happens is when you have a long-term relationship with someone at home or in a dialysis unit, you come to know them as an individual and you come to care about that relationship. And rather than having that grind you down, you look forward to seeing them, just like you look forward to seeing your spouse or your kids or whoever. It energizes you. And it gives you a great antidote to burnout because you care about this long-term relationship. So too with passion. If you have passion about the research you are working on, it keeps on replenishing itself. It's like a sun. It just keeps on feeling good. And the more you discover, the more you know there is to discover. It keeps on going. So passion needn't die. Once you've got it going, it really can be like a perpetual motion machine. Okay, well, what about those blickety-blank-blank tenure and promotion requirements? Yes, they are real. They are all too real. So embrace your passion with your eyes wide open. Let your heart pick the journey, but your head plan the trip. So please let your passion tell you and tell your mentors in the field that we're in what it is you want to do. If transformational leadership is the thing that you find is so cool, then have the courage of that conviction and stick with it. However, the actual trip, okay, you got to be pragmatic about. If you're a fourth-year assistant professor, don't launch into this major exploratory qualitative project because you're not going to have that show up on your CV in time for tenure. Okay, so you got to be somewhat pragmatic. But please let the passion at least pick where you want to go. For me, one of the most important functions of being a mentor of doctoral students is to give them, I was going to say enough rope to hang them. No, that's not the metaphor. That's really not the metaphor. Is to have them find their own muse. That is, to read enough and read eclectically enough so that they can go back and tell me and our colleagues what it is they want to study. The last thing I want to do is turn Beth, my current doctoral student, into a Blake clone. I mean, you'd look lousy with a beard anyway, right? So I don't want to do that to you. But Beth came to me after all reading and said, hey, relationships, man, this is great. Okay, tell me more. So she is now her own person, her own scholar, because what she is doing comes purely from the heart. And it's my job as her mentor to help, and with her committee, to help her think through what are the more pragmatic ways to realize this passionate dream that she has. So you do need both the passion, but you also need to couple it with pragmatism. Okay, finally, am I being Pollyannish? Which according to Dictionary.com means an excessively or blindingly optimistic person, unreasonably or logically optimistic. Maybe. My intent is to help counter the crassly instrumental and soul-killing advice that we, with the best of intentions, and I mean that, we want the best for you guys, with the best of intentions often give newbies. All we're trying to do in our PDWs and our mentoring is to sort of give you the advice we think will get you to the next important career stage. Realize, though, that that really is kind of a narrow take on success in this field. And my worry is if you take those recipes too much to heart, the very thing that brought you to this field might get squashed. So my desire is to help inspire and remind you of what I suspect were your reasons for beginning this odd but wonderful journey in the first place. Remember the reasons that brought you into this field. Hold on to them, man. That's why you're here. Don't let it die a slow death. Now, I've got wonderful, that kind of cutesy way of putting it, because it is a wonderful journey. I mean, we are paid to indulge our curiosity. We are not told what to do. They say, okay, you've got the degree. We know you're a smart person with all these kinds of skills. Go out, find stuff that's going to help move the world forward in positive ways, and that's your job. How cool is that? So remember what that part of the journey was you want to take and embrace it. Okay, thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Want to Q&A? Sure, okay. We've got a few minutes left. Do you have some questions? How will the Leafs do this year? Yeah. Kim?
I'm right there with you. I believe everything you're said.
But?
The killing me is not any of the things you said. It's reviewers.
Yeah, yeah.
And editors. But so what do we do about that?
Say a bit more. What's your bugaboo?
I'm trying to do things and be broad and submit unusual stuff. And it keeps getting rejected. Now, there might be good reasons it's getting rejected, but the Jay Barney story really resonates with me. The guy really did have a cool idea, and the only way he got it published was to basically self-publish it.
Yeah.
And, hey, I'm the incoming editor of Annals, so maybe I can do that now. I feel like I'm beating my head against the wall.
I know.
And it does wear you down.
I know. I've written about system fixes, but that doesn't help the individual. For me, the review process, it's like Churchill said about democracy. It's the worst thing to do, but it's better than all the other options. It's the same kind of thing. Ultimately, the review process does sort the wheat from the chaff and makes papers better, like the one we just had, our paper in AMR. The reviewers were awesome. I mean, that's the way it's supposed to work. But God knows, I know exactly what you mean with the reviewers, and they've all got their own particular preferences, and they want you to write their paper. I know that. The good news is there's still so many foundational papers that appear on a regular basis that you really go, whoa, I wish I'd done that. So somebody somewhere, some editors, some reviewers were able to actually go, whoa, this is actually a cool idea. So despite my kind of gloom, and realize that at the end of the day, all of us we're the reviewers, man. It's not another room over there. We're the reviewers. We're the editors, right? And so if you believe in your paper, try to work through the channels as best you can. And the good news is there are enough top journals in our field that even if, and we've all had this experience, even if that journal doesn't seem to get it, you got all these other ones to pick from. So please, 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 don't back away from your love of the topic in fear of what the reviewers might say. Let them be jackasses. Give them the chance, though, to go, whoa, that's actually such a cool idea. I mean, Jay Barney's the exception. He essentially self-published. Yeah, but think of all the papers that you love. In fact, ASQ, I think, is a model for publishing really cool papers. Think of all the papers that you love that an editor went, whoa, yeah, pretty cool. I don't know if that answered it all, but please don't give up. What am I telling you to give up? Your dreams you do fully, but please, for the rest of you, please don't abandon your dreams because of that. Rob?
Blake, I love that you said exactly everybody here.
I like Rob. He's a nice guy. Yeah.
And I just want to piggyback on it and add one other source. I was, ironically, taking a reading course from John Spo, who had been a student of Kurt Lewis. And somewhere he happened to say, you know, Lewin told us not to read.
Whoa.
Now, well, I thought that was very. I'll get to the punchline of what that really means. But then some years later, I read something, and this is the site I want to give you, even though I don't know it exactly. The American Psychologist, at the back they have letters, common letters. Dick Nisbet wrote one, which was a parody on the book Screwtape Letters that C.S. Lewis had written, where a devil is giving advice to his nephew on Earth about how to get the soul. And so Dick Nisbet wrote a letter from the anti-creativity muse about how to stamp creativity out of graduate students. It's a terrific little paper. It's in the American Psychologist.
That is so cool.
Years ago. And I was at a party one time and saw him, and I said, hey, in that you've got this little comment about Lewin and not reading. You know, where did you pick that up? And he said, well, Stan Schachter was my advisor, and he told me that Lewin had said that. And what Lewin meant was think first.
I love that because by satire it reveals how stupid some of what we do actually is. Right? It makes you realize how ridiculous it can be. I think we have time for maybe one or two. Yeah, one more question. Yep, I know you.
I'm Tom. How are you?
Of course, of course.
How are you, Blake?
How you doing?
So I think one strategy that a lot of us have is you kind of have your meat and potatoes area, and you know everything what's going on there. Hopefully that's an area that you love, or at least still like a lot, and you can do things in that area. And then the exploration is things other than your meat and potatoes area. So the meat and potatoes is kind of the practical, okay, I got to do this stuff, and I want to continue to do that. So it's not a totally BS area. You care about it. But then you do these other things that are reaching out, and they might hit or they might not hit. They're riskier, as you said. I'm curious what your thought is on that kind of a strategy. Is it a compromise where you're kind of throwing away your passion, or is it the blend of passion and pragmatics that you're kind of referring to?
Yeah, I think that's a good example of what I said about pick the journey with your heart, but plan it with your head. Because what you're saying is, I know what I want to do, and it's such a cool idea, but at the end of the day, I got to respect the fact there are external constraints in what I do. Can I have it both ways? So I can keep on spinning out the meat and potatoes. I'll be known as Tom Becker, who does this and this and this. But at the same time, I've got this really cool sideline. So I actually think that's quite workable. At the end of the day, what is workable is it's in your heart, right? So this is not about dissing exploitation at all. If you love doing meta-analysis, bless you, go and do it. My concern is, in your example, if that sideline is your passion, then how do you make that possible? And to that extent, yeah, I think your example works quite well. Guys, well, okay, one more, good. It'll be the question to end all times. Jeff? Right. Yeah, very cool. So by the way you frame it, it kind of conditions their expectations. In fact, one of the things I've noticed over the years with AMR as an editor and as an author is how many people don't talk about the boundary conditions. And I'm thinking, oh man, here is your chance early in the paper before they've prejudged the road you're on to kind of set the parameters of what you're going to do. And once they're specified, I find they're actually pretty congenial. But in the absence of doing that, to your point, why isn't this more about that? And how can you do? So framing, yeah, absolutely is an excellent way to have your cake and eat it too. Guys, thank you so much. This has been a joy. Thank you. Thanks, Mary.